The world's destruction began its countdown. The numbers on the electronic screen flickered continuously. Time gradually diminished with each flicker. When all these numbers turn to zero, the world will be destroyed. Beneath the giant screen, the little people witnessing this scene fell into chaos. Some cried out and fled in all directions. They seemed to want to vent the fear in their hearts. They wanted to find a hiding place in this small town. But there was still a group of people who remained calm. They still had doubts about the world's destruction. You look at everything happening before you, not knowing what to do. You didn't cry out like those fearful people. But you weren't as calm as the others either. Xiao Huang, beside you, perhaps noticed your unease. He asked you, do you think the world will be destroyed? You look at Xiao Huang's expression. He seemed to have his own firm answer. The reason he asked you was perhaps just curiosity about your thoughts. You weren't sure about this. I think so. After getting the answer, Xiao Huang suddenly became animated. He said, then, you're on the destruction side. You asked, confused. What? The destruction side? Xiao Huang told you to turn around. You discovered that the once chaotic crowd under the timer was now divided into two groups. The people on one side looked dejected, the light in their eyes gone. They seemed to have accepted the tragic fate of impending doom, and thus lost all desire for anything. In contrast, the people on the other side were still talking and laughing. They occasionally glanced at the timer above their heads, treating it as just a magical prank. They looked upon the pessimistic people on the other side with complete disdain. Often in conversation, they used words like timid and cowardly to mock them. Xiao Huang walked into the crowd of the destruction side. Now, only you stood alone to the side. Everyone's gaze turned towards you. They were using their eyes to pressure you to join a side. After some thought, you joined the destruction side. You were more inclined to believe the world would be destroyed. Not long after that, the destruction side and the survival side became two completely independent groups, although you all still lived in the same town. You no longer had any interaction with those who joined the survival side. After separating from that group, the destruction side moved to a new town. A new, small society gradually formed within it. The members relied on each other, maintaining its function in a new way. Not long after living in this new town, a person wearing a long blue gown knocked on your door. This long blue gown meant he was a member of the Waiters. The destruction side has two branches. One branch believes that disaster is inevitable, so they passively await the disaster's arrival. They call themselves the Waiters. Then, another person walked up from outside. It was Xiao Huang. He came from the other branch of the destruction side. They also believe that disaster will eventually come, but their goal is to find a way to survive the destruction. The two of them came to you to fight for a crucial vote. The passive Waiters decided that before the destruction, they would squander all the food. Meanwhile, Xiao Huang branch decided to store the food and distribute it reasonably. Both sides voted on this issue. The vote is now tied, and your vote will decide the outcome. You cast your vote for Xiao Huang's side. The food was stored and distributed reasonably. Although the Waiters were dissatisfied, they didn't want to disrupt the existing order. You think the reason is probably that all the members of the Waiters are people waiting for wanting to live out their days passively. These people are simply unable to organize any force to confront Xiao Huang's branch, so they could only accept this result. This choice also made you and Xiao Huang friends. At this point, nearly half the time had passed. The atmosphere in the town also became increasingly oppressive. Xiao Huang found you during that time. After Xiao Huang became a high-ranking member of the destruction side, you didn't have many opportunities to see him. So when he suddenly came to find you, were still a little surprised. Xiao Huang walked into the room without much pleasantry. He said, you know, I believe destruction is inevitable, but maybe there's still a chance to survive. We need to figure out the origin of the destruction, or in other words, what this disaster is. This last sentence, he seemed to be seeking your answer. You still hadn't caught up with Xiao Huang's train of thought. You answered with an uncertain tone. Perhaps it's that timer. Xiao Huang nodded. The two of them went outside. The sky was dim. The timer blended into the grey background of the sky, as if embedded there. You stared at the constantly ticking timer. It relentlessly recorded the process of the world's destruction. Xiao Huang looked at it. Is this destruction a natural disaster or a man-made one? There are no corresponding PI disaster signs. Until now, no one knows what destruction specifically refers to. He continued. But the beginning of everything is because this timer started counting down. This is the only sign of destruction we know. Only this string of constantly counting down numbers is heralding the gradual approach of destruction. You say to Xiao Huang. Indeed. Until now, there has been no sign of destruction. If it's a natural disaster, then perhaps birds would fly in chaos. If it's a man-made disaster, then there must first be a villain among us. But none of these things have happened, just because of that string of countdown numbers. We are certain that destruction is coming. Do you really believe the world will be destroyed? Xiao Huang said. It will definitely be destroyed. Otherwise, none of this has any meaning. You ask, or what? Xiao Huang's eyes seemed to become profound in an instant. He replied, word by word, all of this. You didn't ask further. Just then, a person ran over from a distance. That person said to Xiao Huang, the people from the survival faction are here to steal our food. Xiao Huang cursed. Damn it. He quickly asked how many people had come. The person replied, all the people from the survival faction have come. The number is about the same as our entire destruction faction. They are now outside the city walls. You wonder why the other side came to steal food. Xiao Huang said, the original granary of the town is now within the sphere of influence of our destruction faction. I think they ran out of their stored food, and that's why they're eyeing ours. You say to Xiao Huang, we have to share the food with them. We are no match for the survival faction. You know, more than half of our destruction faction are waiters. These people who choose to wait for death before the destruction will also flee when facing the enemy. We essentially only have half the strength to fight the other side. We can't possibly be their match. After an internal struggle with himself, he gritted his teeth and implemented the plan you proposed. Xiao Huang led a team to load half of the grain onto carts, ready to be transported out. Before opening the city gate, you pulled Xiao Huang aside. You told Xiao Huang, we can't just give them the grain directly. If we easily agree to their request now, they will realize our internal weakness. They haven't directly attacked yet, precisely because they think our strength is equal to theirs. When you negotiate with them later, just act as if you are on equal footing. No need to lower your stance, and no need to be deliberately aggressive. Of course, the grain still has to be given. If you push them too hard, these people might not hesitate to fight to the death. After they make a concession first, then you concede and give them the grain. Xiao Huang nodded, then led a few fierce-looking warriors to stand on the city wall. After some negotiation with the survival faction back and forth, finally, as you expected, you used half of the grain to send away the large army of the survival faction, and in return, received quite a few weapons in exchange for the grain. This event, in the face of the world's just an insignificant little episode. The people of the destruction faction soon turned their attention back to the ever-decreasing time on the timer. At this time, 3/4 of the time had already passed. At this time, the survival faction was extremely depressed. People hurried along. Their faces all wore a gloomy expression. Until now, no one had proposed a reasonable plan to avoid or prevent the destruction. Someone said, let's leave here. Go somewhere else. Go to a place without that timer. Maybe then we can escape that destruction. You say, we can try. So you sent out a small team to first find a suitable place to survive. You were also in this team. Your group walked through a strange wilderness. The few people in the team, after a few days together, had also become familiar with each other. One of the team members pointed to the timer above and chatted idly. You guys say, who on earth created that thing? Everyone shook their heads. You also looked back at that timer and suddenly realized something was wrong. You quickly asked the others, how far have we walked from the town? Someone answered, I don't know, but every time we walk until we're exhausted, we stop to rest. We've rested like this more than 50 times. You said, we walked so far. But look, that timer hasn't changed at all. It's like we haven't moved away from it at all. You ordered an immediate return to the town. After returning to the town, Xiao Huang and the others gathered around. Someone asked, why did you guys come back early? You said, no matter how far we walk, that timer is always hanging over our heads. It is an existence that transcends the understanding of this world. We really have nowhere to run. Xiao Huang listened to your conversation, muttering to himself. World, Xiao Huang repeated this word, his eyes fixed on the void, as if thinking about something. Just as he said, there's no need to run anymore. We have nowhere to run. I need to think about some things. Don't disturb me during this time. After Xiao Huang said this, he locked himself in his room. Time continued to pass. The numbers on the timer ticked out, getting smaller and smaller. Some numbers had already turned to 0, no longer ticking. The oppression within the destruction faction, under the constant compression of time, finally erupted. More and more people became waiters. They started to go crazy, taking advantage of this last bit of time. The destruction faction had completely lost order. The town where you are has also become a battlefield for venting emotions. People picked up weapons and smashed things everywhere, setting houses on fire. Brawling. These things happened every moment, until the ticking numbers were down to the last 2 digits. This madness reached its peak. Someone set the town on fire. The direction the fire was spreading reminded you of Xiao Huang, who was still thinking in his room. You ran to his house and knocked hard on the door. After a while, the door slowly opened. A disheveled Xiao Huang walked out. You wanted to grab him, but he stood still and said to you, I think I already know everything. You and he both looked up at the timer on your head. The numbers on the screen showed only a few dozen ticks left until it reaches 0. You asked him, Have you thought of a way to save the world? He was silent for a long time and began to speak. There is a temple in the mountains. In the temple, there is an old monk and a young monk. The old monk said to the young monk, "There is a temple in the mountains. In the temple, there is an old monk and a young monk." The old monk said to the young monk, "You interrupt him," asking what he is doing. Xiao Huang said, "This is the way to save the world. But you see that the time on the timer has not increased. This world was destined for destruction when it appeared. Our actions are also all predetermined. Our world is not flowing water, but motionless ice. Our story is like an impurity in a piece of ice. From beginning to end, it has always been there. It will not move an inch. No one can save this world. Everything was doomed from the start. I speculate that parallel worlds also exist. 10 or 20. I'm not sure. These worlds are like floating ice on the water's surface. They will change as they flow. But each world is still a solid piece of ice, with a predetermined ending. You ask, what is the true nature of this world? At this time, the timer has already started. The final countdown. Xiao Huang looks at you. Have you discovered that this world was originally just an empty space? You can't process the huge changes around you for a moment. Looking at the numbers about to return to zero above your head, you can only ask the last question. In what form will the world be destroyed? You will know soon enough.